Hello, my children, and welcome to the Church of Pentan Podcast, the premier Battle Spirits Saga talk show. May the cores be our saviors. I'm Espira, I'm your head of service, and joined by me are my apostles, John and Cosmic. John, welcome back to the show. How are you feeling this week?
I am feeling great. Just got back from vacation, had a work trip followed by vacation, so I am energized and ready to talk about the new stuff.
Yeah, lots on the horizon. And Cosmic, for another week, how you doing, buddy?
Yay, new week, new me. Let's go.
I think that's like a pretty good take. I think for the most part, new format, new us, new battle spirits, right? I think is going to be a lot of exciting. So there was a ban list, and we are going to be talking about that. First off, we're going to be talking about the Melbourne Grand Open. There was another one that happened this weekend. We've just been turboing through Grand Opens the entirety of the month, and Melbourne is another one added onto that list. So we'll just touch base on kind of what happened there. Then go and talk about the Grand Open dates fixed for Europe. Then we'll jump onto the ban list. Then, of course, everyone's favorite segment, guess that flavor text, and then finally we'll be closing out more reveals. They've added now every color has we've seen kind of what they're going for, as well as magics have been starting to see their release, and we've seen the nexuses. We kind of know what the sanctuaries will do. So lots to talk about on that front. But go ahead, John.
I was going to say, do we know how many cards we've seen? Does someone have like a total count? I didn't even think to look.
I think we're like 101 or something like that. Yeah. So I think we're some ballpark of 20 something cards, which kind of makes sense when you consider that the only things we haven't really seen are the magics from green and blue,
and the X-rares,
and then the X-rares, which are 14 of those. So yeah, I would say ballpark 20 is what we haven't seen yet.
Should be exactly 20, in fact.
Yeah. So tomorrow, then, well, I guess today, based on when this is being posted, we should get the last magics, and then Thursday X-rares. Thursday and Friday probably.
Yeah, there won't be enough magics for how they've been releasing them so far. So there's a small chance that we get an X-rare tomorrow, but I doubt that they're going to do that for us. It'll probably have to wait another day.
Yeah.
If they do the lore set thing where they're giving us one card a day, I'm going to pop.
So magics, X-rares, and then by the weekend we should be getting the SPRs. So by this time next week we'll have the whole set.
Yep. And then for what it's worth, hopefully also TPs. Like, they're not super impactful for the first couple of Grand Opens because they usually wait a couple of weeks before making them legal. But I mean, we had Scope Owl in set one, we had Axe Spider, so kind of see where the power level threshold falls on those. So hopefully they group those together because there's not that much time until the release of the set. So
yeah, and speaking of the TP cards, I feel like now with the bannings, some of those from set 2 might see more play. So not quite sure which ones yet, but like both green ones are pretty good. I think it's just, Axe Spider nonsense, Pterosaur nonsense kind of kept a lot of that down.
The fact that Koju doesn't protect himself, though, is straight offensive. Like,
that is tough.
That card so much, but as I keep playing Armor Tree, it's just like I cut him every single time. I got down to like 1 or 2 and then just wasn't worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that even though he can't get himself, your opponent still has to at least get him first and then the other stuff. He's not useless. And if purple gets, more popular now with these bannings, he could certainly see some play.
Yeah, very, very much like him as a sideboard option for sure, for consideration.
Yeah, I mean, he's a lightning rod, right? Like you said, like it's almost like how in Magic now they do a lot of ward, which is just like an additional cost to removing. He's kind of like a ward spirit in a sense where they need to spend double the amount of removal to be able to get rid of the thing they actually want to get rid of. So at least there's that.
Yeah. So we'll see.
With that, we will go ahead and jump right into the results of Melbourne. And to be honest, I think it's a lot of more of the same, if we're being real here. I think Pterosaur's kind of like everyone's kind of running the true duelist tech of all the jokers kind of in the main to kind of help you hedge against the Axe matchup. But I've also heard that Axes and for what's worth TP promos in general aren't super accessible in the rest of the world as they are in NA. I know I've even just now a couple hours ago got messaged by a couple of Chileans asking me if I could bring some Axe Spiders with me over to Chile. So, access is definitely a big thing there. So who knows? But in terms of the top cut, we're seeing half the spread be Terra, which one of them is Alex, because he's doing his whole international road tour right now. So congratulations once again to Mr. Blandon. Then we did get 2 purple player decks, 1 Axe Spider deck, and then a green deck. So I think kind of general, everything that we've seen, right? Like so far, the entire set 2 wave or season or whatever you want to call it has essentially been kind of like a 2.5 way battle where it's been a back and forth between Axe Spider and Pterosaur, especially now that Pterosaur has the main deck Jokers. They kind of see way more representation in the top cut. Then we've got Tempo Purple, which I think both lists were essentially Tempo Purple lists, kind of fighting it through. And then odd times you'll find like the odd green deck that kind of breaks in. Rip Yellow, because Lord knows that color hasn't seen a top cut since like 3 months ago. So, but I think generally more the same. I don't think there's much innovation for us to kind of pull from this, but with the ban list now, this is kind of the last tournament or the almost last tournament of the format. So, going into Chile is going to be the last one. And I assume card access is kind of on the same par in Australia as it kind of is in Chile, maybe a little bit harder in Chile even. So this is probably at least a good indicator for what the last grand open of the season is going to look like.
Yeah, I don't think any of this is really a big surprise. Pterosaurs over the last 2 events, for sure, really 3 if you count Scotland. It's really taken off once the Joker tech kind of got out there. But I mean, other than that, none of this is really a surprise. I feel like the green aggro makes perfect sense. Axe Spider is kind of its worst matchup, and if there's not much Axe Spider, then obviously it can sneak in there. Also has a pretty good Pterosaur matchup, so that's really not surprising. And then I know the Hong Kong players love purple, so 2 purple decks in there. I don't think any of this is really surprising.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I got to give a shout out to, though, and we saw this with Ayumu's data set, and also just knowing what we saw in the top 32 reports for some of the other Grand Opens, is that green isn't played in usually a good amount, right? In terms of a very small amount of the field overall, but it does happen to sneak into like top 16 or top 8 from time to time. So I'm hoping that we will see more green within set 3. We did get some insane Nexus cards with it. At the time of recording this, we haven't seen the magics yet, but fingers crossed for some good green magic. But I definitely think with the lore set at a minimum, green does gain a lot going into this. So green is the new yellow, where like it just barely gets into those top cuts and whatnot. But I'm really excited to see these X rares, in a couple days, as we talked about here soon.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of green, I think green aggro is a very, very, very good deck. It's fast, and the guys are just gigantic. So, I was saying its worst matchup is Axe Spider, and with that no longer in the meta, I think that green is really well suited, at least for aggro, for the Pro Tour at the very least, and going into set 2, we'll kind of see what they gain and can do with it. But it's a great deck, I think. So seeing one in Melbourne, of course, Tim top 8'd Tulsa with it. I think that the deck from the Grand Open was similar, except it had 4 Valkyrie Mist main deck, which is pretty cool. So it's a really cool deck. I don't think you need the Elasmoth anymore with the new Tokiwa. Like, I think it's kind of the same thing except better.
Straight swap.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you probably find room for a 3rd or maybe even a 4th Tokiwa, but you want at least 3. But I think that deck is really well positioned. I think everyone should have at least some version of it in their testing gauntlet for the Pro Tour.
I keep telling everyone on my own videos, and I keep putting in the Discord, like, I'm 99% sure it's just what I'm playing at the Pro Tour. And, it might not be the best pick overall, but just coming out of what I've been playing a lot of set 2 meta, and just knowing that it gets in a better position, it's just what I have the most reps with, what I'm the most comfortable with. And Tokiwa, and the very limited games I've been playing so far and proxying that up already, has been insane. Like, just a wonderful card.
Yeah. It's good. You kind of just play like a Hellbent style deck, which is, no hand. So you just play pretty much face up on the table like white aggro, except you have this 5-drop that comes back every turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling card engine with the benefit that like your bodies also aren't really vanillas. Like the benefit of green aggro is that like your bodies tend to do something. You'll play your worker ants and stuff like that, so you'll be able to ramp up into your bigger stuff to level them up better. But also, you probably just happen to have things like Tokiwa, which is like the odd Gale body, right? And I think it's kind of nice that at least your bodies on board have that utility versus kind of white aggro, where it's faster, but it's also this is what you're going to get. So
yeah, with Tokiwa, Emerald Pencer, you might even be able to to tech in like one Koju, Thorn Prison. You have so many ways. Dream Bomb, Valkyrie Miss. Like your opponent's just never blocking. So
well, suppression comes back, right? Everyone slides back in those two main slots, but some will battle through one way or another.
Yeah, I think the benefit being that like you're generally gonna have fine bot. You can survive through suppression attacks depending on how you line up your green attacks, which is kind of nice. Maybe you only get off one, but so I think there's a world there. I think obviously we're going to talk about the Banlist in just a second, but I think there's a large overarching impact of losing kind of some of the biggest threats of the meta and kind of how that moves forward, especially since realistically. Anyways, we'll talk about those during the Banlist, but realistically, the impact is only going to be so limited when realistically the Pro Tour is going to be the only tournament in this format.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, before we just kind of jump into that to kind of close the ends on that, we did talk last week about how the Grand Open in Wave 3, there was an overlap between DreamHack happening in Germany and the Pro Tour itself. The tournament were happening on the same weekend. So that was very unfortunate, but thankfully Bandai did hear out the cries and a lot of frustration from the players in the communities and did end up changing the date. So now it's actually moved over to Liverpool happening on November 18th and 19th, which is great. I mean, I think at least giving whoever didn't have the opportunity to be able to go and attend the Netherlands one will have a chance to go here. I think it being in London is like a pro and a con. I think you have a larger player base that live in London, so you're going to get a lot more like people who are around that region kind of participating. But from what I hear from other Europeans, England is one of the harder countries to get into ever since they left the European Union, because of like, you know, if you go to any other European country, you can kind of just walk across the border and it's chill. But obviously there's a little bit more there once you involve the UK. So a little bit iffy there, but at the end of the day, I think in terms of the quick turnaround time, because this was a turnaround time of like a week, 10 days or something like that to be able to get a new event spot and date. So I'm big ups for Bandai for at least kind of working through that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a great call. You know, I'm sure people from Germany aren't thrilled that they now have to travel to the UK yet again for another event, but it's for the greater good. I mean, you know, you can't just stick, you know, they're cramming 6 plus the Pro Tour. So they're cramming 7 events in like a 6-week window or something, you know, crazy like that. You know, with the Pro Tour being, I think, what is it? We have all of November and 3. Yeah. So there's 7 weeks from the second Pro Tour to the third Pro Tour. So it's like impossible to fit all those events. So, you know, I think they're doing the best that they can. You know, we'll see how it works out for the attendance, but you know, I think this is what they had to do.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you just need to commit to the system that you built. You built a Grand Open system that feeds into the Pro Tour. You can't just blatantly have a tournament that doesn't feed into that system. You kind of like, this is what the system you filled out for the year. You kind of just have to follow through and allow that everyone can participate in a way that you promised it. So at the end of the day, I still think the structure for next year should probably be more similar to the way their other Bandai games do it than a Pro Tour system. I think unfortunately the system really only works for big games like Pokemon, like Magic the Gathering. But I think in terms of like, you just got to see it through, and hopefully maybe with Worlds we'll have announcements of how they do it next year. But at the very least, you know, they recognize that something kind of didn't go right here and they fixed it. So big ups to them. Thank you for listening out to the community.
Yeah, for sure.
Then the biggest of news, we got a ban list. This is a pretty real ban list here. Very impactful in terms of the go live date will be October 6th, which is actually the new date for the Lorset, in North America, because we did get a delay from 1 week. They did have a developer message saying that from here on out, we'll get updates to the ban list right before the release of a new set, which means the next time we hear about it will be set 4, which is kind of in line with the way that they do it in their other games. And just going to read them out and then let the boys kind of have their own takes on it. So, Volcanic Break limited to 1, Oviraptidon banned, Axebiter banned, and Netherworld Depths banned. And these
free
OV. So to kind of provide context, I think Axebiter and Depths were on everyone's radar, right? You got Depths because of the fact that it creates non-interactive gameplay, and then you got Axebiter because while it can be beat, does warp the entirety of the format, and it has a negative play experience with like locals and people who aren't so in tune with kind of how to play around that kind of deck, and it kind of skews the way that like, hey, 8 cards on my sideboard, or Axebiter exclusive cards, even though half my deck is already Axebiter exclusive, right? So those weren't all that weird, but a lot of conversation around the ban list was around the fact that, like, well, if we deal with those two, then Terra was already kind of the best deck before, and Axebiter was kind of one of the greatest tools that the format had to be able to deal against that deck. So then how do you deal with Axebiter? And then it's like, or how do you deal with Terra? But then there's conversations of like, Terra's just kind of like a good overarching package. Like you can hit one thing, but kind of the other things are really good. So then it's like, okay, do we hit the early game? Do we hit Scorched? Do we hit Starblessed Draw? But then if you hit Starblessed Draw, then Purple's tier 0 because now there's nothing stopping. They're crazy on summon. So it is. I do appreciate that this ban list looked like not only was it hitting the problem cards people were having issues with, but taking the step beyond that and recognizing what would the format look after that and kind of deal with it. And I think that's where the OV Raptidon Volcanic Break still kind of makes me WTF a little bit, but OV Raptidon at the very least is one of those things where, like, in combination with Scorch, you could play Scorched, and then, you know, next turn you can play OV Raptidon, potentially set up for like a turn 2 Rex and like draw cards. And I think being able to kind of hit, as funny as it is to hit a vanilla, lands itself as a pretty okay spot to give Pterosaur the ability to still play the game, but at the same time, kind of open up the gameplay for other decks.
Yeah, I gotta give a shout out for the Elephants, though. We're all very excited to see Volcanic Break get limited to 1. Like, Red's always going to be an awful matchup for us, but we saw this early back in season 1 where Volcanic Break just catches every dual eagle under the sun and catches a lot of, like, if yellow can only play the mid-range game, and then we're just always losing massive tempo to this spell that they can easily go up to 4 of. Like, we're so far out of that on top of other colors who can easily splash it. So I think from overall, yellow is going to get the most out of this, but I think it just brings a little bit more air into the mid-range meta, especially when we're going to be going into, Floodstream, the meta next. It does lend itself to be a little bit questionable because you're still hitting 5s anyways. Like, you're still hitting every 5 and 4 under the sun. But, then it's harder to play Floodstream in non-blue decks, so there's some consideration there as well. So maybe yellow still gets hit, but it gives me, I probably shouldn't, but it gives me a little hope that I can find something for the Pro Tour in yellow, but I doubt it. I'm not going to give myself false hope. Not yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that this ban list is fine. We all knew, Axebiter and Depths at the minimum. The various discords and groups, all pretty much agreed that something from Red had to go. We thought maybe Starblessed, Errata maybe, or Scorched ban. But they chose OV, which it's fine. I still think that the Scorched problem still exists. In the sense that if you play a turn 1 Scorch, you kind of just run away with the game. You don't even need Rex at that point. So we kind of have to monitor that moving forward. But it does slow down pterosaurs enough to where you can play more of a game. Pterosaurs had like a lot of games and instances where they would play, like Scorch on 1, Canyon on 1, and then into, maybe even a Rex on 2, which was so devastating to basically any deck that's not purple or something that has a way to kill Rex, which is few and far between.
Spoiler, just purple.
Yeah, right. Like the break, it's fine. I mean, it is kind of out of left field, but I can see where they're coming from because there are a lot of, we've even seen it in set 3, previews that there's a lot of 8 drops and 7 drops that just have terrible stats. Like, I'm talking like 4K and 6K at level 2, and break just pounds those cards, like immediately makes them unplayable. So limiting it to 1 like makes cards like that whale X rare and set 2 like moderately playable because you don't just get blown out by a 3 mana spell. So maybe cards like that can come back. Well, not really come back. They could just show up in general. So I'm happy with the ban list. Like just looking at my browser right now, I have like 7 BSSDB tabs open with decks. Like, it's fun now because you have basically 10 extra slots, like 8 to 10 extra slots in every deck to add cards that you really want to play. It's not just like, hey, now I have 4 Depths, 4 Burning Force, Dream Bombs, whatever. You have all these cards that you can play that you didn't have room for before.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think so. Like the thing with break is that I think the funny thing is that break reads like a non-egregious removal card, right? But I think in the way that removal currently exists in Battle Spirits, it feels like maybe a card that would be fine to decent in like maybe set 5, right? But it just so happens that in this set 2, set 3 world right now, the bodies line up really bad BP wise for a lot of boss monsters in this game. Like it hits like a level 2 elk and like, or you know, like just there's lots of weird ways that the cards are lined up right now between BP and cost and everything, that it feels like it might just be printed a couple of sets too early, versus where like red has like just started creeping up into being able to hit 4Ks and stuff like that. And I still think that red needs ways to be able to deal with big bodies, but at the moment that's more so in the form of things like Rex Confront and like, you know, spirit based removal, which is kind of where it's lining up. So it just feels like break is a fine card. It just kind of maybe exists a little bit too early in the where the game stands.
Yeah, like the fact that it has flash is kind of a big deal, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing with it is you can kill these huge spirits at, you know, instant speed. Whereas cards like Core Drain, which are, you know, not better, but can
The
kill more
equivalent,
things,
the equivalent, I would say almost,
is
yeah.
is only main phase. So, you know, it's just more balanced. So, you know, I
It
think
almost
that's the most egregious part of it is that it's flash.
Yeah, no, it almost makes you wish it was 5K versus 6K, right? Because that offer up at least a little bit more flexibility in what it's hitting instead of all these 7 and 8 drops. And then it's still a good enough early removal. But it also makes me wonder with the X rares about to be spoiled again, the time we're recording this. But red also does have BP in or increasing BP destruction based effects. So the Ancient Dragon, for example, could say something like your BP destruction effects gain 1,000 power or something. And then suddenly Volcanic Break is a 7K. So it does make me wonder if this is something that they're planning ahead as well for the set 3 meta, or you know, they've already designed up to what they're probably on set 6 or 7 right now. So that also could just be like the future dev team saying, hey, this is what we're putting in a future set, might as well limit it now. So very curious to see where this ends up in the next couple sets, you know, X-Rare wise, or if there's a Nexus that does. I think it was mostly attached to Spirit, so if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, probably. I think a card like Ritual Flame, which was previewed today, might be somewhat of a replacement for Break. You know, if you wanted more of those type effects, we'll see how that works out. But you know, right now we're at 1. I think every red deck will play 1 and just kind of move on with their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what the limit. And in terms of, funny enough, like I'm looking at these bands, and in my mind, at the very minimum, I'm like, I don't know that any of these colors or decks are, you know, quote unquote dead, right? So I get my biggest question mark is Terry, but purple. I mean, Cosmic, can purple draw cards now? Like, is that a thing it can do?
I think it has a number of ways to do it, in fact.
So your pop-off was like incredibly funny when I saw in your video when you just showed the list. And the worst part is it wasn't even a complete list, and it was still like over a dozen different ways that the color can draw cards. So
yeah, well, I mean, Depths wasn't even the best draw card in the purple deck, probably. I mean, obviously it's very, very powerful, but like I feel like cards like Black Lance are just better overall in the purple deck. So, but I mean, you know, just you know, not to not cut you off, but I think that purple is still obviously very good. White control doesn't need Axe Spider. They'd like to have it, but you can still just play the Elephant Nexus, Namen City or whatever it's called, and play like, you know, elephants, elks, and Aegis, and just be, you know, more of that style deck, which is still incredibly good. And then the Pterosaur deck is still just a Scorched Battlefield deck. You know, they're a little slower to get Rex out, but you still have to deal with 3-4 spirits in play on turn 2-3 with a Scorched Battlefield, and there's not a lot of decks that can do that.
Yeah, I think that's where it's like, if anyone like walks away from this thinking any of these decks aren't viable, I think you're just wrong. Like you said, Axe Spider is nice, but it doesn't prevent a turn 2 elephant if your opponent plays into it. And like at the end of the day, Axe Spider was already almost a flex spot in regards to the fact that like sometimes you would have to swap them, like add in Grey Armors in the 4-cost slot or whatever, because to account for the matchup, having armor or white. I think the biggest thing is the fact that it wasn't impacted by core removal, which means like Curse Dragon combo wasn't as powerful. So we might see like that kind of come back, because now like it actually just wipes the board unless you start going back into Fullas and stuff like that, which people didn't run anymore. Pterosaur is the only question mark, but even then it's still just a really good deck. Like oftentimes in my playtesting, it's literally just Scorched on 1, 3 dudes on 2, draw like a couple of cards, and then like I'm just running away with it. So
then what do you do? Like, you don't have to play Rex on 3. I mean, at that point you have 7 cards in hand to your opponent's 4, and they're way behind. So it's still the same deck in the sense that it's still a Scorched Battlefield deck. It's always been a Scorched Battlefield deck. It's just, people always think that Rex is the problem card, and it's not. It's always been Scorched since day one. Rex is very, 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 very good at closing a game out, but Scorch is the card that lets you run away, with the whole game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's those additional cards, and it's like not just additional cards, it's additional cards on turns 2 or 3. Which is like where the additional cards draw some impact. Like you can look at a late game board, and like each opponent has like 10 whatever cards. At that point, it's more about the quality of the card than the quantity of the card. But early game, it's just being able to gas out your opponent, and that's just it just helps you, like you said, run away with it.
It's just, ask any purple player, even Ron Miles would say this, that the card that they hate playing against the most is Scorched Battlefield. There's a Starblast draw, but Scorched Battlefield is the one card that hoses purple so bad because they can't do anything. All their early drops are just these little guys that can't do anything, and you just draw so many free cards off of it, which then leads into Starblast draws, which then leads into everything else that blows out purple. So games are so much different. So I think Scorched probably should have been hit, but I could understand them not wanting to hit that out of red. We'll see how it plays out going into set 3. Maybe, set 3, which we'll get into, has some cards that kind of control Scorched Battlefield. So we'll see how it works out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, effectively, I think this is very much a Pro Tour ban list. I think, like Pterosaurs were probably already being kept in check by Floodstream, which is coming in the next set in the starter deck. So like that's not as much of a worry. There's a world in which maybe we have more tools for against Axe Spider. Depths, I'm kind of happy no matter what happens that Nexus is gone personally. But in terms of, it very much feels like in terms of the Terra hits, it's primarily for the PT, which I'm glad. I'm glad that we're not sacrificing the PT for the sake of like just trying to not shake the boat too much. But I do think the Axe Spider and Depths ban are probably things that are good going into set 3, but we haven't seen the entirety of the set. If anything, I'm just glad that I'm hearing Pro Tour participants be excited for the Pro Tour, and also still excited to go on to set 3 and test that. So it's especially for me right now, it's a very weird feeling, just like making sure my headspace is still in current format so I can play Chile, to then jump into Pro Tour format, and then the week after jump into set 3 format. So it's a lot going on at once to try to figure out kind of what makes the most sense.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was talking to Alex earlier. I got my passport just this morning. So the first thing I did was look at Chile flights, but they're like $1,500. And I'm like, that's not happening. So, so we're not doing that, but at least the Pro Tour is guaranteed now. And I'll actually probably go to the UK Grand Open for season 3 as well. Yeah. Because I don't think I can make any of the US ones. I know that sounds crazy because they're in the US, but they're in like the worst times for me. Like the Atlanta one is like 2 weeks before Christmas or something crazy. And then
3 weeks before, or no, because then the Pro Tour is the week before Christmas.
Yeah, 2 weeks. It's like December 10th. And then the California one is like I forget
a
when.
week after the
I think it's around Thanksgiving.
So it's the Pro Tour, and then after that it's the Netherlands.
Yeah. Okay,
and then
so
the
like
week
the
after that is is Pasadena.
Yeah. So they're just at really weird times for me. So it's either go to the UK Grand Open or just skip season 3 entirely, which I really don't want to do. So we'll see. But I might be going to the UK Grand Open. Yeah.
Okay. And can't convince you to go to the Netherlands for like 2 weeks back to back. Just stick around for a week.
As a business professional with a family, there is no chance I can go to the Netherlands for 2 weeks. I mean, I commend, and I am very jealous of the people who can. I am not one of those people. So.
Guy had to pull the dad card and everything, man.
Yeah. Now, I did honestly think about flying back and then flying back because the flights are only like $600.
Oh, that's not terrible at all.
Yeah,
that's what I pay on US flights sometimes.
And I'll pay that much for a hotel anyway for that week. So, I'm considering that, but it's, if I do the UK Grand Open, I'm not going to do the Netherlands as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
makes sense.
Very fair. So very exciting. Looking forward to that. I'm glad that myself and a lot of the Pro Tour participants are very excited to see what's happening, and the fact that we can, like John said previously, have like a dozen, at minimum, at least have like some odd 10 to 12 cards that we can actually change in our decks now and kind of reconfigure, which is very exciting. So I've been messing around, and hopefully we can kind of see where that jumps through. So before we jump into even more reveals from Aquatic Invaders, we got everyone's favorite segment of the show, Guess That Flavor Text. So I will be providing both of our apostles with a flavor text from a card, and then they have the opportunity to guess it. They have 2 lifelines, and if either of them get depleted, it's 1 point goes away. At this point up the board, John has 2 for his amazing Ursula or whatever guess like 2 shows ago, and then we did get Cosmic 1 with the Undead Skeleton Gravedigger. So gentlemen, are you guys ready for this week's flavor text?
Let's do it.
I will be stunned if you guys don't get this one, but let's see here. So, to weaker spirits, it matters little who is in power. And the worst part is the moment you guys use lifelines, you guys will 100% know which one this is. And if you guys have a guess, let me know that you have a guess, and then hold it in for the end. So let me know when you guys lock it in. But if not, we can definitely move on to something else.
I don't know this one offhand.
All right. So the way that I'm going to do it from now on is I think the cost is the most like indicative thing. So I'm going to use that as the last hint moving forward. So for now, we're just going to give you guys the family type, and it is a reptoid.
Reptoid? Oh my goodness. Is it iguana knife?
It is indeed iguana knife.
Yeah.
So iguana knife, the 1 cost, no reduction reptoid. I think it might actually be the only reptoid in the game. I don't know. I think there's a second one.
There's a new one in set 3. I know that.
Oh, the chameleon's a reptoid also?
Yeah, there's also one in set 2, if I'm not mistaken. That's why I was trying to think of what it was, but I like knowing the context of what you would pick, it had to be the iguana knife. But I'm almost positive there's one in set 2.
Yeah. I have 6,000 EB. Let's see. Reptoid. There are 4.
Wow.
See, I told you.
But 2 of them are in set 3. So set 1 has iguana knife. Set 2 has armor lizardon.
Yeah, that's what the vanilla. Oh yeah, because we played that at the sealed event at our LGS this past weekend.
Set 3 has Basilax, which is a vanilla, and then of course the Camille Whip.
Oh, he legit has an axe on his back. I just realized. Holy shit! Yeah, they love weapons.
Look, the reptoids have sick art.
Yeah, dude, the reptoids are like. Yeah. What if we were Digimon, right? So it's just like you take an animal that exists, you give it a knife or a gun, and then you just move forward. Right?
Well, there's some cards that you hear the card name and see the art, and you're like, "What the hell's this?" Like the reptoids, you hear the name, and that's exactly what the art is. Like armor lizardon, it is a lizard with armor.
Mm-hmm. Iguana knife is a knife lizard.
Exactly. They do not mess around.
Wow.
So congratulations there. Well done, John, on the guess. Very well. It was a meme in the community for a very long time. So I was just like, I wasn't sure how much you guys would pick it up on. It's also actually really hard to find flavor text that's like generic. A lot of you can tell. So the more I keep looking into these, you can actually kind of tell that a lot of their flavor text is to world build. Because oftentimes flavor text in Battle Spirits right now talks about the overarching story of what everything's going on and doesn't really focus on like I think Iguana Knife is one of the few where it's like very generic to just like about this spirit as opposed to like the political ongoings of like the Gloom Kingdom or whatever like that. So it's you can definitely tell that there's a lot more focus. That's where they put a lot of focus in regards to lore. So And once again, congratulations to John for Guess That Flavor Text. But moving on to the last segment for today, we do have reveals. They've been ongoing. We talked about them a little bit going on to last week, and I think we stopped at White Spirits. I think that was the last that we really had to touch base on. So ever since then, we've had Blue Spirits, Green Spirits, and then Nexus, and starting off with Magics. So a lot of it is returning from stuff we've already seen in regards to when they did the reveals initially of the set and kind of what we're expecting. So, like I think Giant King Randolph is like a fantastic card for an example, kind of going into the blue stuff and keeps me excited. We did end up getting the Ant Pilgrim, so it has a when summon search for its sanctuary, which we'll be seeing the sanctuaries very soon because obviously it's a huge component. We're assuming there's going to be X-Rares, Guardians, because all the lore keeps talking about the Guardians of the Sanctuary, so odds are we're probably going to see in the future be even more support for the sanctuaries moving forward. I think the biggest question mark card not question mark, but kind of the card that keeps coming up over and over, and I'll actually let John and Cause go at this for a minute, guys. Is Archduke King? All right, so I'll read what it does, and then you guys can go at it. So Archduke King Taurus, which is apparently an OG Battle Spirits card, is an 8-cost 4-green reduction Great Beetle / Blade Beast. On levels 1, 2, and 3, when summon, select 3 of your spirits that are Carapace, Great Beetle, or Insectoids. Place a core on the void onto each of those spirits, and when the spirit attacks, it gets to create an Ant-Man token on level 2 and 3. It is a 4K on level 1 for 1 core, a 6K on level 2 for 4 cores, and a 12K on level 3 for 9 cores. Gentlemen, is this a good card?
I would love to tell you tomorrow after we get the Magic spoilers.
No.
Oh, man. So here's the thing. One thing that we do not have, or we did not get at all in set 2, is the green ramp archetype, despite what a lot of people will tell you and how it lined up, because we lost steps now. So we do not have any more draw engine that is available to us. We also saw the 10-cost Void Lord, which is Huuga and whatever Fenhang, I think is the new name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which you are not, and this is where John and I disagree, or he just hasn't seen the light yet on it, whichever. But there is no reasonable world where you're going to have enough time to set up a bloody 10 cost in green unless you have a perfect curve, which is like Worker Ant-Man, Butterfly, Archduke. Oh shit, I finally get to play the 10 drop, because you're just dying to Tokyo off 5 before this ever gets on the board. This card is insane. The effect it can OTK you out of nowhere with Hurricane Winds. But in what ungodly fashion do you think you're getting to this card, even with how good Worker Ant-Man has come? Like, as someone who's spent this entire set playing mid-range or control style of green decks, this is not a real card. The only way this is going to be a real card is if Duke is something we're able to play because we got hand reverse. And that's what it all comes down to, which we're going to find out, I guess, at the same time everyone else is watching this video, because we should find out if we get hand reverse tomorrow or not. But this card is too bloody expensive in all current versions of green. It does not have a home, period. It really doesn't.
I like it.
I think it's really good.
It's a good card.
This is like
afford to play this, though. That is the problem.
I think that there's definitely a world where this card is the win condition in some green hybrid deck. It's way, way, way too powerful to never see play. It is the most powerful card green has, like, not close.
I think
well, there's a reason why we had to use elephants and Derm Dyna for
but
all
like,
of
but I think the fact that you had to use elephant is kind of proving the point, right? Like, you could afford to play an 8-cost spirit that needed also 1 core maintenance, so you could afford to do 9 cores. This is a 10 cost, but it has potential for up to 6 reductions, meaning that realistically you probably have like 3 reductions on board or whatever, which kind of lines it up with what you were paying to play elephant anyways. Now, don't get me wrong, elephant draws you card and ramps you, so like it's a big thing. But I like, in that context, I do still think like Feng Huang as like a 1 or 2 of on your top end is still something that can just blow out your opponent.
I mean, it's not something you're ever going to play 3 or 4 of, like, oh man, this is my whole game plan. But like, as like a 1 or 2 of, like, this card is insane. Like, you play that guy and I don't know what your opponent does. Like, he's very, very difficult to kill unless you're purple, and even still he's hard. But it's just, he's huge. All of his abilities are insane. So we'll kind of see where he falls. I totally, agree with what Kaz is saying about the, like, the current green decks that we have, he doesn't really have a home. But I think with set 3, the green decks are going to look quite a bit different. So we'll kind of have to see where he falls. This 8-drop guy, I think he's completely unplayable. I don't see any redeeming qualities about any of his abilities. Like, he has a wind summoned, so like you're already getting pounded by Star Blessed. And his level 2 and 3, which takes 1 billion cores, like you just make a 1k ant. Like, it comes to play on tap, so I guess that's one redeeming quality, since nothing else puts ants in the play on tap for the most part. But he's small for an 8 cost. Like, green has these huge beaters. Like, the Blade Beast guys are just huge. And then you have this guy who's an 8 cost for 4 cores, and he's a 6k. Like, it's like, what? Like, I don't know what they were thinking. But I just don't see where this guy ever comes to play. I understand he can ramp 3 cores, but if you're at the point where he's ramping 3 cores, you've like either already won the game because of a board full of carapites that are already ramping, or like I don't know what. But I would, if you have 3 carapites in play that are already ramping, why don't you just play the 10-drop? So, you know, or any other card like 7-drop Tokiwa or something that's not this card. So he's not good in aggro. The 1k token isn't helping you anywhere else. So I don't know. Like, I could be very wrong, but I don't think this card is even remotely playable.
I think the biggest thing for me is and I agree that, you know, something that Greens felt like it's missing. It's like it's turbo ramp piece, right? Like, you got Worker Ant, which can like ramp you 1 a turn and whatever, and that feels nice. You got Emerant and whatever, and like there's the nice like tempo-ish ways to be able to ramp, but there's low like, you know, like the fact that for a long time the best ways to like giga ramp was to kill off an elephant, which is like a white card, and that's how you actually got lots of ramps and gained a lot of advantage. So this almost feels like a you know, the green elephant in its own way, and instead of card draw, what you're getting are tokens that attack, which is like fine. But unfortunately, I think like if you're in a position to play this card, you might actually just be better to play Nomen. And in terms of like turbo ramping, like I feel like this card has a niche, but like we already know Toki 5 is going to be insane. There's an argument on how playable Fang is, and that's like before we even see Hurricane Highlands, which just like is a 4 cost Nexus 2 green reduction on levels 1 and 2 for 0 cores. When one of your spirits would Gale a summon, place a number of cores from the void, and that's rated equal to the number specified in its Gale effect. So Toki, you're playing Toki, he's ramping you 2. You play Fang, he's you know, ramping you 3, and then you're going to be able to get his level 2 for free. So and then he's got like, if you destroy your opponent's thing with BP, you get to exhaust one of their spirits, whatever. It kind of like adds on an additional 1 to their Gale. So I just think it's a combination of the fact that like now green has like a real Gale archetype, or at least Gale cards that lend itself really well to kind of doing a thing that Arctic was doing anyways, that you just kind of don't need to rely on that card anymore.
Yeah, and you know, like I know I'm being really hard on Arctic because I just don't think he's that good, but like I guess there's very niche situations where he's probably very good in a blowout, but green just has so many better things that you can do. So, you know, more powerful things. So why would I be wasting time playing this guy when I can just do exactly what you just said? Like play Highlands, play cheap Nexuses, play ramp Carapites, and then just slam the 10-drop or slam 5-drop Tokiwa or both. So there's just no room for this guy. Like,
I think this would have been a sick set 2 card.
Yeah, this card would have been great in set 2. Then maybe you wouldn't have to play Elephant in every green deck. But you know, now it's like I just think you have better options moving into set 3.
Right. Again, the thing to remember, though, that our Japanese Battle Spirits listeners will know, with hand reverse, you have to be extremely, extremely proactive and always making sure you're dropping your hand to make sure you're able to refill for max value for what your opponent has currently in their hand. So Archduke does immediately give us those 3 cores, which helps you turbo accelerate into however many more spirits you can play on the next turn, and then windmill slam that hand reverse. But again, if we don't get hand reverse, it doesn't matter. But the other thing to note is Gale will probably have its own archetype, right? Where there might be like the ramp side of green versus Gale being 2 different things, because Gale by nature is very much more tempo focused than like ramp into big dumb idiot focus. what was it? I already forgot. Hauga is already, wanting to end the game by itself. And that is most likely just going to still be the best like end game green payoff that we're going to get. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Gale focused X rare that plays more into its own archetype than Heavenly Emperor Feng Huang plays into the like ramp archetype sort of thing. So I think we will see that divergence. We just have to wait for the X rares.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you there. We definitely need to see the X rares. But as far as Gale goes, I don't think there'll be a Gale archetype yet. Like the Gale cards, for the most part, are pretty mediocre. Like I think the best ones you can play are like the 4-drop, like Retainer from set 2. He's not bad. And then of course you have Tokyo 5. And then I think this 10-drop. Like I think those are like the 3 Gale cards you really want to play. Outside of that, there's like a Swift one, I think, that's not very good. And there's a couple other ones. Like their stats are just miserable. And
there's like a Hydra that's kind of neat, but kind of doesn't line up perfectly. Yeah, this one right here.
Yeah, him. Like he's too expensive, I think. And like, I mean, his stats are better than like some of the other guys. But I don't think he's really worth this, worth playing.
I think the biggest thing is that like for green looking forward is that this card's insane. And any shell that can best support this card will probably just be the best green deck. IMO.
Yeah. So like, I think you're just like Highlands, Tokyo, and going back to Highlands, I thought that card was terrible when I first saw it. Like I'm like, this card is not that good because I didn't like the Gale cards. But after reading Discord and kind of taking part in conversations, like I kind of got turned around a little bit on Highlands. I think it's actually probably going to be pretty solid. But not for a full Gale strategy though, more for like, Tokyo, like the 4-drop Retainer, and then the 10-drop. He's your payoff in that deck. Like I think you just played this giant 16K with Gale 6000 and like has 600 abilities. So like that's the deck that the Void Lord's good in.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to me. Gale is very similar to Curse, where like I don't think unless for some reason we get even more Gale support that forces you to play all Gale cards. I think it just happens to be a keyword that's very strong. You take the good cards that have Gale, and if you have supporting pieces for it, and it's just the benefit that like green hasn't had nexuses that really roll well with kind of what green was able to do in set 2. So I think the fact that Hurricane Highlands exists just as a reduction, because Lord knows it's kind of difficult to get reductions on green at the moment because there's no real nexuses worth playing. So
that's why the Sanctuary is good too.
Yeah, exactly. So just the fact that you can get a nexus that'll do something eventually is probably just fine.
Yeah.
I think that's what we have to mention though, like really is the Emerald Sanctuary here, right? Like the fact that you're now able to give a relevant, to be fair, stat boost to your Gale units it is pretty relevant because again, it's early reduction we were talking about. It's only a single core, which is a joke for green, like, right? It's, my God, a single core. I'm sure we can pay for it. But it's also just anytime the effect happens. So 2000 BP does help make those, especially like the 4-drop, be a little bit better for where they're going to be landing. But, 2 of these would be insane. Getting like a 4K buff because they'd both trigger onto a Gale unit is suddenly very scary.
Yeah. I don't think that this card by itself merits playing some of the worst Gale cards, like the 3-drop Sanctuary Keeper guy, Guardian, whatever his name is. Like he's probably pretty bad still. But like this, buffing your already pretty good Gale cards to make sure that they stay around after they're blocked, is very, very good. Just the fact that this is basically a 1-cost Nexus permanent reduction that only takes 1 core to keep active, like that's pretty insane. So, I think that this is probably the best Sanctuary.
Yeah, off the back of like kind of what it works utility wise, I think purple's kind of neat too.
I love the purple one.
I was just saying, I'm pretty sure a lot of people will say like green's my favorite, but I'm obviously biased because I've been playing a lot recently. But I think overall, a lot of people are going to give it to Amethyst in this case.
Possibly, like green needs it more than purple. Like green needs that Sanctuary a lot more. So plus the effect is obviously very good. So I think that puts it over the top for being the best Sanctuary. But the purple one, I am a huge fan of like the Reanimator / Dredge type decks. Like I love playing with my graveyard as like a second hand. So I've already been brewing up set 3 decks that use the 10-drop purple guy to bring back like the green Void Lord and the yellow Void Lord and just do all sorts of crazy things with your graveyard. So I love this card. I think it's incredible. So we'll see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
I've been so curse pilled. I just realized this is during either attack step and just not during your attack. Like, holy shit, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Even more crack than I thought.
It's very good.
Yeah, you can just trade off your entire board trying to find for your one win con and find it. And funny enough, this is going to hurt Cause a little. I think this is a better yellow Nexus than the yellow Sanctuary is for yellow.
Probably, yeah.
Because especially with the other lander stuff, you can actually stack the top of your deck and get what you want, or you can throw 2-drops into your trash to get like Work for God Beast or whatever. Oddly enough, I actually think this is a better Nexus for yellow than the yellow Sanctuary.
I don't want to. I still don't want to talk about how dirty they did us, man. Like,
So,
look
okay.
how cute even Pentans are right there, man. Like,
So the yellow Sanctuary, okay, the way it's worded, all right, if you have multiple of these, say your opponent has 2 cards in hand and you have 3 of these yellow Sanctuaries in play, right? You could theoretically just look at their same card 3 times in a row, right?
Because they have to shuffle their hand every time.
Yeah. Okay, like that's terrible then.
Like unless your opponent hits you with like one of these where all he does is like
right. I was hoping that it will be ruled similar to how like Volcanic Canyon
where they
ruled,
stack and you just do it all at once.
Yeah. So I mean, if they work like it's just look at one card, put it back, shuffle, look at one card, put it back, then like this is terrible.
Yeah.
And like it's already not good because yellow has a bunch of other nexuses that they want to play even before they even think about this card even existing. But you know, if it works like that, it's not great.
It sucks because our Pilgrim was like actually exciting, right?
Busted.
Like
your Pilgrim is so good.
I was excited. Like again, gorgeous artwork, had relevant effects, had blessed of all things too. I'm like, holy shit, we got a really insane Pilgrim. Like I'm feeling so good about the yellow Nexus. And then we got the yellow Nexus, and it was unfair, to say the least.
Yeah, I think who knows? I mean, there's still a saving grace, and it sucks that like supposedly all these sanctuaries have guardians. We have to assume at this point we haven't seen any guardian cards in the spirits that they're going to be an XR for every single one. So maybe the yellow one is saved by how good its yellow guardian is, right? Like that may be a thing. It's just unfortunate that the Nexus can't stand on its own 2 legs. It kind of just exists. But like, to be fair, if we're talking about Nexuses that just exist, Diamond Sanctuary skill text literally says, I just exist. Like,
yeah. And, you know, I know a lot of people are kind of down on these sanctuaries because they're really boring, right? Like their effects don't really do anything. But their main purpose, I think, is that they're just basically 1 cost permanent reductions, right? Like that alone is very, very, very good. And, you know, I think that people are kind of overlooking that. I'll admit that it sucks, like that their effects are kind of shit. But like I think green and in particular purple, like those 2 sanctuaries are very important to those colors, just because those colors really want that early reduction. So whereas other colors like yellow doesn't care, red doesn't care, white, I mean, maybe that might find a spot in the deck somewhere, but generally doesn't care. So
yeah, I think the 3 big things that I look for when I look at new sets, or at least kind of like the most important things. One are thematics, right? Is the set exciting for people to consume in terms of like what we get or whatever? So if that's a collab set or if that's like the Void Lords, thematically the Void Lords are very exciting, right? So like there's that. Then second is impact, and impact isn't always exciting. Like you said, like Pterosaur is the best deck in the format for the past 2 sets. It's not a very exciting deck. Like, let's be real. It's a deck that abuses reductions and abuses good stat lines, right? Like for the most part, and like good card advantage, but nothing about the Pterosaur play style really requires like a Giga Brain. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying everyone needs to be a Giga Brain player, but like there's no like you could look at a Pterosaur deck and just be like, okay, I understand what it's trying to do. It's just trying to be the most efficient deck. And on that level, I think the Sanctuaries are amazing for the level of efficiency they provide, because like you were saying, green and purple need those reductions, and green hasn't had good ways to have reductions on board because the Nexuses didn't line up with the way that the playstyle worked out. So the fact that they exist now are absolutely huge. And then the third thing though is interest, intrigue, you know, mechanics, right? And I think in terms of like set 2 kind of whiffed on both impact and new ways to play the game. And I think at the very least with this set, we're seeing new ways to play. We're seeing impact at least with these sanctuaries, and then new ways to play.
Do we know why there's no blue one? I mean, I don't follow the lore at all.
No. I've been wondering that myself because they do have one, right? And they also mentioned the Imperial Seal in the lore a couple different times, which we don't know what that is either. So there's a couple things that just I don't know why they were cut from the set or whatever. But we got all the Nexus cards, so
right.
Yeah,
it might triple check that we have all the numbers, but I'm
unless it's like a TP card or set
a TP or maybe
set,
because like it could be a lore reason, right? Like, hey, based on the lore, maybe that's the reason Blue is able to make like the core rain or whatever the heck happened that they call it. So like,
I was just curious if there was like a lore reason. So.
Maybe it's an XR. Maybe it's an XR. God. So we kind of jumped the gun a little bit when we got into that discussion about green and talked about the sanctuaries. I guess to wrap it up, we can at least talk about the red sanctuary as well. So Ruby Sanctuary is a 2-cost, 1 red reduction. Nexus 0 has nothing on level 0, but then on level 2 for 3 cores during your attack step when an effect of one of your spirits that costs 5 or more destroys one of your spirits, draw a card. Not super impactful now, but red is probably going to have to go into a big red deck going forward. Set 2 kind of played into the notion of big red. So, maybe kind of set 3 is kind of where we go in a post-flood world.
I don't think that'll ever see play just because there's other options. But yeah, I mean, it's not like it costs way too many cores at level 2. If it was like 1 core or 2, maybe, but the fact that it's 3 cores at level 2 essentially makes it a 5-cost Nexus. And like, you're always going to play Canyon and Scorched over this in pretty much every deck.
Yeah. So there's that. The blue spirits are actually kind of interesting in the few that we haven't seen. So now we're jumping into kind of closing out on the spirits.
One last thing I gotta jump in with though. Just pull up any sanctuary again. I gotta give a shout out to what they're doing for at least more BSS exclusive artwork. All the sanctuaries were gorgeous. Huge win there. Please give us more Battle Spirit Saga artwork, exclusive artwork, because it's updated, it's fresh, it looks good. Obviously the framing still needs a little work on these cards, but it does give me some hope. And it was really nice to see the updated artwork with, set 3 and hopefully even more in set 4. So sorry, that's my little blurb. I just had to tack on.
No, yeah, 100%. I think, we need to be able to promote, hey, we like the direction they go whenever they make new art. I hate every time you point out the frame to me, because like I always realize how blurry they are when I look close in and stuff. So
they're muted. I hate it. Like, just if you look at Battle Spirit Saga and Japanese Battle Spirit side by side, and you see how much worse our frames are. It's just like, this is not exciting. But hopefully, I don't know, fix in the future, print run or something. Who knows?
Yeah. So I mean, just to touch on the blue spirits real quick. I know that we're ready to move on from spirits, but so the blue spirits are all, I think, pretty solid for the most part, but they all kind of do the same thing, which is kind of annoying. I was having this conversation with someone the other day. I was like, when we first started seeing these blue cards, we're like, man, these are pretty cool. Like, kill everything that costs 3 or less, or the opponent gets taxed for attacking with things that cost 5 or less, or however they're worded. Like that was all pretty cool. But then as we see all these blue cards, everything does the exact same thing, just in a different way. And it's, I'm not saying that that's lazy. I mean, I'm sure that's what blue does, but it's just, it's kind of annoying to where they just, everything in the same set is just like, okay, we're just hosing everything that costs 3 or less. So, it is what it is. It's not really a complaint. It's just kind of like an observation. Like, I don't know why they did it like that. Block Golem's really good. That's a card I wanted to point out.
You make a good point at Block Golem, right? Because as we just saw with the Nexus revealed, or I guess yesterday, now my days are blending together, right? That effect does double up in that sense where you're putting a tax on 5 or less. But now that you're forcing your opponent to remove the core, to weaken their guy, to also then make Block Golem a better blocker, that's how it can stack up at least and be more interesting in seeing how those cards play off one another. But I do agree. It's like, oh, here's card number 3. I think that it's like destroy 3 cost or less. But at the same time, at least we got the 6 drop, I think it is, that destroys the highest cost, which is like the other thing.
Yeah, the Ocean Knight. He's pretty good too. Like, that's the Ocean Knight, right? If they have like 10 or more cards in their graveyard, you kill the highest cost guy.
There you go, Ocean Knight.
Right? Yeah. He's pretty solid. And then Iron Golem, I think, is probably the best blue spirit though. Iron Golem is insane.
Which one is that one? Is that the protection one?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the
Yeah,
4 cost. Yeah, it's just the common. That card is crazy good. The fact that you can put it on like your 5-drop luster card and they can't do anything about it is crazy.
Not being able to remove Michaela is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and then you can like really just enable some stupid combos with double hard and just anything you want to do.
So that's the thing, right? You have to give up the, do I play stuff for free or do I get this Luster Spirit to do its thing? So yes, you have the flexibility to pick between the two, but the Soul Core is a very limiting factor here. And
yeah, for sure.
And so
yeah. But I think this card is crazy though, to be able to protect any spirit with the Soul Core is just like that's good.
Yeah, do absolute immunity against anything is huge. I like you're saying, Cause definitely the Soul Core is a big thing, right? Like you can't put this on a Derm because it doesn't do anything. But like the fact that like I can put it on, say, a Joker or a Michaela or a Luster Spirit, and I know that, combat aside, my spirit will live to see the end of the combat step is a huge deal, right? Or live to see my next turn.
With Shen, if you have like Exhaust Nexus, you can set up a huge turn with Shen and Exhaust Nexus with this Iron Golem guy, and they can't do anything about it. Like they just have to take it on the chin. So, I think that card will get splashed in quite a few things that have like one key spirit that you don't want to, ever die. So,
yeah, I definitely love it as a sideboard tool. The one thing I want to go back to with a lot of the 3 drops doing the same thing. One of the things, and this might come in the X rare because the aberration, whatever, will most likely have the effect. But we've seen the destroy 3 cost and less. We've now just seen the destroy the highest cost. But the other thing that we're missing is blue also then usually gets destroy like 2, 4, 6, and 8 costs, right? They'll have like a specific breakout of different costed spirits that they end up killing. So I'm hoping that one of the X rares will do that and kind of like bring the whole like destruction based focus of blue together. But we did get like all of the 3 or less. I guess there's flood too, so I guess you have to count flood in some way, but more spirits would have been nice. Then you have Allegro, and then there's like, okay, the X rare should be the other missing piece where they have one that's, I think, destroy all 4 or less, if I remember correctly, was like Dan Guo, I think is the name of the spirit, the original one, and that will most likely, we know we're getting aberration for the X rare, just the way set spoiler works. So I think we are going to see the return of that, key spirit out of blue in the early sets. But this is one theme that we'll continue to build on. And like green was kind of lacking in set 2, other than like, hey, we're Grandman and Thorn Prison. Blue, I think at least is coming in at a better spot, but also does not feel as fleshed out as it should be. But, one set problems and all that. But hopefully the X rares can give us a little.
That. And, moving into the blue nexuses or just nexuses in general, I think the blue nexuses are crazy. Like there's 2 in particular.
Welcome to blue, baby. Let's go.
Like there's 2 that change the way you play the game entirely. One is Lighthouse, and the other one is that Enchanted Arena. Yeah. Those 2 cards are crazy. Like they might get played in non-blue decks more than blue. I don't know, but they are just incredibly good.
Yep. So for our audio listeners, Seabed Lighthouse is a 3 cost, 2 specified blue reductions Nexus on levels 1 and 2. During either attack step, your opponent cannot use magic cards in their hand that do not share a color with any of symbols on their field. So Smag format, anybody? And then on level 2, all your level 3 spirits gain 2k BP. And then the other one that we're talking about, which is not on their Facebook? No, it is. Okay. You're talking about the Enchained Arena, right?
One.
Yeah, so Enchained Arena is a 3 cost, 2 blue reductions. On levels 1 and 2, when destroyed, place a core from the void into your reserve. And then on level 2, for 2 cores during your opponent's attack step, your opponent's spirits that cost 5 or fewer cannot attack unless they pay 1 core.
Yeah, those 2 cards are crazy.
Yeah, these are the taxing effects that have me so excited for blue. I love making a miserable time for my opponent. And like these are just incredible. There's one last one that's actually still a spirit. And unfortunately, I think because it's symmetrical, it's not going to be as strong. But I've even heard like JP players talking about Fantastical Monk Sanzor, which is a 5 cost, 3 blue reduction beast folk. On levels 1, 2, 3, neither player can draw using magic effects. And then on level 2 or 3 during your opponent's turn, your opponent cannot summon a spirit that costs 4 or fewer more than once per turn. I think this is one of those cards that'll be like really strong like 4 sets from now.
Yeah,
right?
like this card is what Frigg wishes it was. Like, I mean,
True.
it just makes that card look completely unplayable, which it already is. But like, it's just if we got this card last set with Frigg, like we might not even be having this conversation about depths and all this stuff. I mean, like I know depths isn't like a magic effect, but it just really controls the draw power of the game. And it's a very powerful card. It's not huge. Like, I mean, it's only a 3K for one core. But it has a very powerful effect. So I think it'll find a home somewhere. I don't know personally what blue decks look like in BSS. I haven't tested blue hardly at all. Like I've tested blue cards, just not like blue as a color. So maybe this card finds a home in one of those decks, but it's very, very good. And then same thing, like back to the arena, like if you have that card in multiples, I don't know how you ever lose the game. Like your opponent just can't attack you.
Well, you're going to find out very quickly. Blue actually struggles a lot with 6 and higher costed cards, like really, really struggles as someone who's been playtesting quite a bit already. And like green is actually very scary for us because you ramp enough cores anyway. So there's quite a ways around it, but it lends the conversation back to with Flood entering the meta itself. Like, are we going to see a bunch of like 3 and 4 costed spirits that you don't mind paying a core off of just to get the attack in? Like, Worker Ant-Man, sure, you have to put 2 cores on attack. He still swings. You get the effect. You get the core back anyways because it's one of those you reserve. There's stuff like that lines up, but it is one of those things that's just really meant to punish those early aggressive strategies. And what I really love is that it does have 2 reduction symbols on this one. So it plays into that blue really wants to have multiple Nexus on the board at a time because we are going to see, and actually I'm really surprised we didn't see more of it now that I'm thinking we got all the spoilers other than the X-Rares. We didn't see another Raid Spirit, which is really weird. So I guess the X-Rare is definitely going to be a Raid Spirit. I'm actually pulling up the list to see what the types were again.
Yeah. I think, and like Raid Spirits, and I think that's kind of my thing with blue. I think we can kind of all agree that like blue is never losing to aggro. And if you do, you did something like horrendously wrong or your deck just hates you. But like, but it's another one of those scenarios where it's like, I love the bottom end. I love what it's doing early game, and that might be enough. But the problem is that is the late game going to match? And right now, I don't think blue has the late, or I haven't seen the late game out of blue to make me feel like it's going to be able to close out the games against like green decks or white decks, right? Like it's just, how do we get to that late game finish is my biggest question now, because like, yeah, we're probably going to get to turn 4, 5, 6, right? Like, I don't think that's an issue with the deck. It's more so, can blue close out the game, or are we going to be doing the same thing that green's been doing and lots of other colors for that matter, where we're just kind of throwing in really like high end white spirits to kind of close out our control matchups, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I said, I haven't tested blue as a color as a whole, but like I would have to assume right now with its limited card pool, you kind of have to splash a second color. It sounds like you're probably going to splash a color to help you deal with the big guys, so maybe purple, I don't know, but there's just like with how good the Nexuses are, like there's got to be something somewhere that puts blue over the top. Maybe the X-Rares are really good. I don't know. But their card pool as a whole has been pretty above average so far.
Yeah, very solid. So did you end up finding that family type there, Kaz?
Yep. So we have War God, Golem, Sea Fae, and Aberration, which Aberration will definitely be Dwango or whatever his name is. I'm totally blanking on the guy's name, but he got the 15th anniversary. Senju is also in there, who should be the War God, and then Golem and Sea Fae, I have no idea what to expect, but for Golem, we could see the return of Castle Golem, the good old Mill 15.
Heck yeah, dude.
Yeah, the Golems have been really good so far. So I mean, I hope that there's some support there, because I want to play at least like Block Golem, Iron Golem, the Dragon Golem's even good if you're playing a mill deck, whatever the mill mechanic's called.
Crush.
Yeah.
It is so ungodly aggressive for how you actually like is. And to be fair, we didn't have at the time recording this, and obviously what I proxied up, like we didn't have any of the X-Rares yet, but Nirvana, like you set up Drag Golem, unless you like high roll 2 of them and like double blitz or something, like Nirvana is just hey, I'm going to attack twice, and like I'm just a big body, try to kill you that way, and then the rest of your mill spirits end up getting there. Like, it's actually very, very, very difficult as it currently stands to mill someone out before you just end up killing them, which is something that we mentioned like at the early spoiler. So we got to see something coming from again, it's probably going to be the golem, because it's definitely not going to be Senju. Senju is probably going to be the raid if I had to take a guess, but whatever golem we get will probably be Crush then. And we'll see what they get up for it.
Yeah. And then, moving into the magics, I know that we've seen about 8 to 10 so far just from the spoilers the last few days. I personally haven't seen anything that has wowed me. I think the ritual fire is pretty solid since we just had break limited. I wasn't that high on this card at first, but now the break's limited, I'm obviously a lot more high on it.
4K is working on it,
Yeah, I mean, 4K kills most things that you really want to get rid of.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's the best burst, there's really I should say the easiest burst to ever get off is when you lose life. So this has the right burst for this effect. So that one's good. Other than this one, I mean, of course, we already saw Plant Trap and the Double Heart.
I think we saw the best. We saw the best ones early.
Yeah. But
unfortunately,
yeah. I mean, I don't think the yellow ones are very good. The purple ones we've seen aren't that good. The red ones, like the other red one's not that good.
The one thing I want to say about Ritual Fire really quick, just because I know we won't go back to that one. The thing to note here is that it does have a very interesting effect that it says select a spirit and then improve the BP for all of that family by 2K. And in Battle Spirits Japan, there are multiple families that are like multicolor or all 6 colors. So it's really interesting to see, when we might get dual color stuff added or multicolored based families added, where suddenly now you're able to get a 2K boost across the board, which can give you some nice blockers on top of killing something that's 4K, which 4K, as we mentioned, is just a really good number to hit. So very curious to see where this one ends up like on the next set or the set after.
Yeah.
Thanks for
that. We got some really cool ones really early on, right? Like we got Double Heart and we got is it Soul Crush or whatever. We got Strong Draw. So like we got some really cool ones early on. So I don't feel as bad about this. My only pain point is that like yellow is supposed to be the magic color and every single one is just like a BB reduction thing. Like this one is like magical light.
Man, the fact that card doesn't have flash for its search effect is just criminal. Like it might be playable.
It would be though.
Like it might be playable if it had a flash effect to grab a magic card. The fact that it is now, I don't think it's playable like at all. Like I don't think you can ever find room in your deck for it when you just rather play a spell that is more like proactive or whatever.
Yeah, and the other one's like, hey, I don't get milled. Also, here's a BP bump. And then this one's like, all your 2 cost or fewer can't be blocked by the 5 cost or more, which is like fine. I mean, I thought Somersault was fine. Like,
but it's a 5 cost with 2 reduction. Like, why? I just can't ever see a scenario where you're happy to pay 3 mana to like maybe make your guys unblockable.
Just get those Pentans going, baby. Bring him back. Make this cost less. Let's go. Let's go.
So
yeah. So I mean, they kind of whiffed on the yellow magics again, but maybe that's by design. I don't know.
Yeah, yellow, right? Like it is a careful pendulum you have to balance just because yellow's the luster color, right? Like
yeah. I don't want like exhaust nexus level power. I just want something that like is exciting.
That changes up the way of play, right? Like your spells usually are kind of like where you can kind of go with it wherever with design because of the nature of the fact that you use them and they're over, but like they're which gives them a lot of high impact, but maybe because of luster, that's kind of where the balance, who knows? Right. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing if there's anything more there. I will say the big one for me, Dimensional Rift, while not scary now, I think is a very dangerous design space to kind of live in for cards like these. So it's a 5 cost, 2 white reduction magic. Main, you may summon a white spirit card with a when this spirit blocks effect from your hand without paying its cost. When summon effects on the spirit summoned by this effect are not triggered. And then it can give you a 2k BP bump if you want instead on flash and main. And at the moment, this actually doesn't hit all that much. The most impactful thing is Enterprise. Which allows you to.
I don't think it's like all that great. It's like at most right now, the best cards are like Elk and Enterprise, and those cards you get a 2-core and a 3-core reduction from it. So, for it to be super busted, there has to be like some 10 drop that has like a wind block effect. Otherwise I feel like this card is like the ultimate trap card, right? Because you can't just play 1 because then it doesn't really do anything for you, and you can't play 4 because then they're sitting in your hand not doing anything. If the BP bump was like 3,000 or 4,000, I think it'd be more, playable. But I don't ever really see this card.
Yeah, I think it's like a design space thing where now it's just like every time when the spirit blocks that's expensive comes out, now you got to consider like, oh, well, what if we got it out on turn 2? Right. And I think it's the impact on board. It's what it does. Like, it's not so much just like, oh, well, you kind of saved yourself 3 cores or whatever, but it's also the notion that you got to skip ahead 2 or 3 turns. Right. So
yeah,
it's that kind of design space. That's like, this is one of those cards where I'm getting 4 foils, throwing them in a binder. And like every set I look back, I'm like, are you good? Yes, no, put them away or throw them in a deck. Right. Like this is kind of where that card to me kind of lives at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, turn 2 Enterprise, it's not nothing. Right. I mean, that can be good. It's just how many Enterprises and how many Rifts you have to play in your deck to make that like a consistent and worth it combo.
Yeah, 100%.
So
I do just appreciate that white is getting to be that more like, I'm going to summon my boss monster color. Like, right, we've already kind of seen this with the Fortress and going to the Elephants and early Elks and whatnot. Yeah. And it's just even further pushing it into that field. So it always feels good to just slam down your big spirit and try to win the game through it. But of course, it does come with that drawback, is you are playing the color that doesn't have a lot of draw. You are losing 2 cards out of your hand. So it's like you're really starting to bleed cards early on. So at least it does have, the back and forth. But I agree with Espira here. It's like, you have to always then, whoever's working on white cards, you just put this card up on the board and say, okay, this is what we have to make sure we don't screw up. How am I making this card? Is it break? Oh, nope, can't do that. Like, it's always just looking at some point.
Just don't print some 12 drop with some crazy when block effect. That's all you got to do.
Yeah.
Or just make the when summon really powerful and the when block like a baby, like Aegis.
Yeah, just kind of exists. Yeah.
Front load it where they can't get it off the Rift.
So at the very least, it's like, hey, if they get a big thing out, like what I like about the fact that all the colors exist now is that we now have the balancing colors are like, yeah, your white player can get out like a really crazy drop, but then like they can't block like the 2-drop curse guy that'll just kill it anyways. The fact that every color exists now means that there's hopefully that kind of interaction counterplay between every color, which should kind of make things easier at the very least to deal with impactful cards like these. Because like for what it's worth, I don't mind Battle Spirits being the 15-20 minute match or game or whatever, as long as it felt like I played an impactful, meaningful games of Battle Spirits, right? So like if this is going to be the more high powered game where it is becoming more consistent for me to drop, my boss monsters on 2 and 2 or 3, as long as the components of interaction with my opponent feel like they're meaningful, I don't necessarily mind the fact that the game didn't go to like turn 7, that I'm fine with that personally.
Yep, big same.
Before we kind of close out, any other cards we kind of want to give highlight to that got revealed that we kind of did not? We overshot. I think we talked about the most important ones, but if there's anything that anyone really kind of has their heart going out for.
Not really for me. I mean, I have a list of like 12 or 15 cards that I think are the best cards in the set. And I mean, we've either talked about them or you guys have previously. So I don't really have anything else to add.
The only one I want to give a shout out to is the Purple Serpent Nexus, just because it gives us a look at more things with Curse and Blood Curse, sure, but really like leaning more into that Rotting Swamp, like, hey, this also cares about serpents. And now we finally got another Nexus like, hey, I also care about serpents. So it's going to be nice to see when some of this really comes online, because no matter what, like, we will always talk about the high-end competitive side of like, oh, we always want to figure out what's going to be the best deck, what's going to win. And we have this already with Pterosaurs, like just being play all the dinos, but I think there's something to be said where at least more on the local level, people just like, going to locals and be like, look, this is my Fabled Beast deck, or this is my Serpent deck, right? And you get to play into those family types. So I do at least appreciate, and I guess we're getting it with Ancient Dragons this set as well, that we are seeing more of this family focus in set 3. That is not just like, hey, here's some snakes, but now also this is actually coming together. It's not there yet, but I think by the time we get to set 4, we could really see some of these families, like not just pterosaurs, being good. So fingers crossed, but I just thought it was a interesting Nexus. And also, hey, Depths is banned now, so we have more room for random shenanigans like this.
Yeah, the very first time I read this Nexus, I thought it was like the most broken Nexus in the game, and that it was, because I thought it said it moved the core from reserve to their void.
Yeah, that's your reverse ramping. That's busted.
And I'm like, this is busted. It's like playing land destruction, right? Which anyone who's played Magic ever knows that land destruction effects are the most infuriating thing to play against. And I'm like, wow, now it's in BSS. This is going to be super good. But then after I read it 2 and 3 times, I'm like, wait, this card's not very good. And it's not that it's not very good. I mean, I think it's fine. It's just there's so much competition at 4-cost Nexuses for purple that, like, where are you ever going to play this card over like a Rotting Swamp? Where are you ever going to play it over like Purple Smoke Valley and those type decks? So I can see it as like maybe like a one of as like a 5th Rotting Swamp or something maybe. But I don't know if it'll ever be a focal point.
Well, you just made the point. You're never playing with Purple Smoke Valley. It's an entirely
right.
Now that's the point of it. And it's also, if you think about all the serpents that we just, sorry, now I'm gonna have to go on my casual me rant. Because we just got all those new serpents that are cursed, it is actually a core burn strategy now, because all your serpents have curse and they're going to be dying, and you're getting them back with either drawing off Rotting Swamp or Rotting Swamp looping them. You're constantly now being able to attack your opponent. Their spirit dies, those cores go to the reserve, you go, oh, sorry, now those cores get burned. So you're burning them out of the Absolute Ice Shield or Burning Force mana or whatever they would have, on top of now we could just play core theft if we really want to make sure. So it's this really cool, actually, like core burn aggressive strategy that we didn't have. Well, technically we had with the Impish Knight or whatever it was called in set 1, like you had that kind of core burn thing, but it's a thing. I have no idea how good it's going to be, but telling my opponent that we're going to destroy their cores this entire turn and they have less and less mana available to them while I'm drawing cards and getting extra value out of it, I'm all for. So again,
I'll,
probably not going to be good.
I'll take your word for it, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know what any of the purple cards do in set 3, because after I read them, I immediately forgot them. There's bad.
A bunch of really cheap curse snakes. That's what we got basically. Okay. And this guy's like, this is probably the most expensive one. Wait, what does this one even do? When destroyed by opponent? Sorry, I like that. Like, why does this guy cost 4? Remove 1 core from opponent's refresh spirits and place them into the reserve. Oh, all right, well there you go. Even more burn for it.
Yeah, so that's kind of what purple does. Like, you have all these cheap serpents that have curse and stuff like that. So, I
purple
think
has my favorite card in this whole set, though.
Oh no, what is it?
Old 2 hands.
Oh, 2 hands, dude.
Both hands.
Oh, dude, no.
Both hands, I think he's called. He's gone
there he is.
as a one of in all my sideboards for the rest of eternity. So after the game, I can just tell my opponent that they just got the hands.
Dude,
both of them.
I think it is an unfortunate thing that this wasn't at least a double gem vanilla. Just like 2 gems, take 2 hit, like both take
so
both
many
of these
opportunities.
Oh my god.
But now you can give your opponent the hands.
All right, I found what card I need to have you sign for me for the binding collection. Officially your card.
Card's great. I mean, I wish I had more reduction. Like, I wanted to find a home for this card at some point, but like 1 reduction 4 costs. I'm like, come on.
Maybe it feels 3 reductions. Who knows?
Yeah,
Beldegor target or something. Alrighty then. So those were kind of the reveals going on, going into this week. Things that you guys have to look forward to if you're going to keep track of either the community Discord or the Battle Spirit social medias. We have the rest of the Magics tomorrow, so that'll be green and blue, and then from there it's just the XRs. Fingers crossed that they're not going to drip feed us 1 per day like they did with the lore set. But very excited to kind of see where those goes, what those impact. If our presumptions that they work with sanctuaries are going to be, how good they are for their given sanctuaries, especially the ones that are already good, like purple and green. So that'll be very exciting to kind of see where it goes. In terms of this weekend, the Chilean Go will be the last grand open of the season, and then it'll be a lore set format if you're playing at locals. So have fun with your Tokiwas and your God Slayings there. And then we'll have nothing for 3 to 4 weeks until we jump into the Pro Tour, which will be the first premier event that we see with the Banlist live. So hopefully it'll be a very exciting tournament. Fingers crossed that it gets streamed. And then we can kind of see how Europeans will fend off against the dozen or so North Americans that I think are going at this point. So that should lend itself to being a ton of fun there. But with that said, everyone, thank you guys so much for joining us on the Church of Pentan podcast. Of course, if you guys enjoy listening to the show, you guys can catch us on any of your favorite podcast platforms, be that Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, anywhere. So if you guys prefer that, you guys can definitely go check us out there, and a 5-star rating is always appreciated. With that said, we will catch you guys next week. May the cores be our saviors.